Hey, what's up? I've really tried, believe me, but I finally decided to sell my M1 iPad Pro. Here's why. I've used all kinds of iPads ever since the first one came out back in 2012. The regular one, the Air, the Mini, the Pro, the larger Pro, the smaller Pro again, and now the 12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro. It's really amazing what you can do with these devices these days, but there are limits. First, a bit of context. I'm what they call a creative professional. I've worked in the creative industry for almost 20 years. Damn, I'm getting old. I do everything from graphic design to coding, photography, video, and motion graphics. So I mainly use tools like InDesign, Illustrator, Photoshop, Lightroom, and Final Cut Pro. I occasionally like to draw and do some hand lettering as well. So a 12.9-inch iPad Pro definitely made sense for me to have as a creative tool. The build of the iPad Pro is superb. It's thin and light. The screen is beautiful, with Retina resolution, mini LED and ProMotion variable refresh rate. Once you've experienced this, it's really difficult to go back to anything else. The stereo speakers sound really good, both for calls as well as listening to music. There's also a Thunderbolt 3 port, a front-facing camera with center stage, and back cameras, which I literally never used. I'd much rather have a flat backside. The second generation Apple Pencil attaches magnetically to the side of the iPad to charge. That's much better than what we had on the first generation iPad Pro. And no, I haven't learned any fancy tricks with it. On the inside, Apple added the M1 chip, which makes the iPad Pro quite powerful while still keeping all-day battery life. Overall, the iPad Pro is a beautiful device with really impressive hardware. So why sell it? Well, it's actually Apple's own fault. Their new MacBook Pros are just too good. I went for the 16-inch with M1 Pro, 16GB of RAM and a 1TB SSD, so the base model. For the first time in a while, the screen on the MacBook Pro is actually better than the one on the iPad Pro. It's Retina and has ProMotion as well. But the mini LED somehow looks better on the MacBook, with less noticeable blooming. Yes, there's a notch. And now, there's not. I used the Top Notch app to hide it. I forgot it's even on there, and I never looked back. And then there's the ports. Yes, plural, ports. MagSafe, 3x Thunderbolt 4, HDMI, and an SD card slot, which I use all the time to transfer photos and videos from my beloved Canon R7. That's actually quite a bit more I/O than the single Thunderbolt port on the iPad Pro, so no more dongles for me. Now, like I said before, the speakers on the iPad Pro are great, but the ones on the MacBook Pro are on a whole other level. The sound coming out of the 16-inch is so good that I rarely even use my Sonos to listen to music anymore. With Apple Silicon, MacBooks don't sound like jet engines anymore. I actually never heard the fans kick in on my 16-inch, even with heavy video editing. Another big advantage of the M1 processor is the battery life. I can comfortably work for the entire day on my MacBook on battery. It lasts quite a bit longer than the iPad Pro, especially with demanding tasks. The power of this chip is just crazy, but there's already so many videos going into real detail on that. So all in all, the hardware of the MacBook Pro has really caught up with the hardware of the iPad Pro, apart from the touchscreen of course. Now, software. macOS versus iPadOS. There's really no comparison here. Yes, you can get a lot done on the iPad, but definitely not everything. I am much more productive on the Mac. The file management on iPad, while it has improved quite a bit over the past years, is just not good enough. It's nowhere near what Finder can do on the Mac. I've actually never thought about this until I tried to use iPadOS in a more professional workflow, And yes, I have tried iPadOS 16 with Stage Manager, but honestly, it's just not cutting it, at least for me. Using the iPad Pro as a design and layout tool definitely works, but it can be frustrating too. You now have apps like Photoshop and Illustrator or the Affinity Suite available for iPads. But in those iPad versions, quite a bit of features seem to be missing. And once you get into heavy files, the apps tend to freeze and sometimes even crash. So I end up taking my work back to my Mac for most of the time. Also, there are a lot of professional applications that are available for macOS but don't have iPad versions, like Logic, Final Cut Pro, After Effects, and InDesign. The real strength of the iPad Pro is when you combine it with the Apple Pencil. For drawing, for example. Procreate is probably my favorite app on the iPad, maybe even my favorite app in general. It's intuitive, quick, and easy to use. If you're an illustrator or you draw a lot, then I think a 12.9-inch iPad Pro is a no-brainer. Also, there's something about writing down your notes versus typing them. It feels more natural and fluid. The App Store has got plenty of good note-taking apps available. Personally, I use Notability. It works really great with the pencil and offers a lot of functionality. It feels like you have a notebook that never runs out of pages. For note-taking though, the 12.9-inch might be too big, so you might be better off with the 11-inch Pro or the iPad Air. Which brings us to the price. Sure, an iPad Pro is cheaper than a MacBook Pro, but once you start adding the necessary accessories, things start to become a bit more difficult. For example, a 12.9-inch iPad Pro with 256GB of storage, an Apple Pencil 2 and a Magic Keyboard will set you back $1,700 US. For that, you have an M2 MacBook Air with 512GB of storage and 16GB of RAM. And if you can spend just a bit more, you're awfully close to that 14-inch MacBook Pro territory. Of course, your choice will depend on what you do and how you use your devices. But in my opinion, you can do so much more with a Mac than with an iPad Pro 12.9-inch, especially for creative work. So in the end, the M1 iPad Pro 12.9-inch is a fantastic device. I just don't use it for those tasks that would justify the Pro price tag. The hardware is great, but the software is what's lagging behind, and I don't see that changing in the near future. There's just too many workarounds needed to get the job done, and that doesn't work for me and the work that I do, and that's why I'm selling it. Anyway, that's it for this one. If you like what you see, then don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.